Welcome to our deep dive from Unlock UPSC. Today, we're tackling a really important editorial about the global arms race. Now, this is a huge topic for anyone preparing for the UPSC, UPPCS, or BPS exams. The big question we're asking is the world really gearing up for another massive conflict? Let's get into the analysis.
So, let's start with a statement that really got everyone talking. Elon Musk has predicted a third world war could happen within a decade. Now, that's a pretty intense claim, right? Is he just being provocative, or is he tapping into a very real fear that's simmering just below the surface? Well, let's see what the data says. You see, a prediction like Musk's doesn't come out of nowhere. It's backed by some truly mind-boggling numbers. The revenue of the world's top 100 arms companies just hit a record-breaking $670 billion. That's not just a statistic. It's a massive signal that something major is shifting in global security. Let's break down what's really going on here.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to walk through this topic step by step, covering these 6 key areas. The goal here is to give you that comprehensive, in-depth understanding you really need for your civil services exams. So, first up, how exactly does a jump in weapons sales lead to this very real fear of a world war? It's about connecting the dots, right? Moving from the numbers on a page to the feeling of instability that many of us are sensing around the globe. The entire debate really kicks off with the latest report from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. You'll see it called SIPRI. This is basically the gold standard for tracking this kind of thing. And what it shows is a massive 5.9% jump in revenue for these top companies. What's crazy is that this happened even with the world's economy facing things like inflation and supply chain problems. It just goes to show how urgent and powerful the demand for weapons is right now. All right, let's get into the weeds a little bit and look at the actual data. The SIPRI report is fantastic because it doesn't just give us one big number, it tells us who the major players are and where all this money is actually being spent. And this chart, well, it tells a pretty clear story. The United States is still the undisputed leader, with $334 billion in revenue. But the really interesting part, look at that surge in Europe, hitting $151 billion. That is a direct result of the war in Ukraine. Asia and Oceania are also huge players, of course, though they saw a slight dip this year. Now, this table gets even more specific. The US has the most companies on the list, but Europe's growth rate of 13% is really significant. What's absolutely fascinating is Russia's 23% increase. I mean, despite all the sanctions, their war economy is clearly in high gear. In East Asia, tensions are driving up spending in Japan and South Korea. And for us here in India, that 8.2% increase is a direct reflection of our push for a self-reliant defense industry. So, what's really going on here? Why this sudden, massive demand for weapons all over the world? Well, the answers are all tied up in the geopolitical conflicts and major power shifts that are literally redrawing the world map as we speak. You can really boil it down to 4 main drivers. First, the Russia-Ukraine war. It's created a huge demand for ammo and has basically forced NATO countries to restock and rearm. Second, the conflict in Gaza has spiked demand in West Asia. Third, you have all the tensions in the Indo-Pacific, think Taiwan, the South China Sea, which is pushing countries to buy advanced defense systems. And finally, there's this global push for self-reliance, what we call Atmanirbharta in India, where nations want to build up their own defense industries. And it's not just any old weapons. The kind of tech in demand is also shifting. The war in Ukraine has been a wake-up call, showing just how critical things like artillery, drones, precision missiles, and good air defense are. But for the long game, for deterrence, countries are also pouring money into things like next-gen fighter jets and submarines. Okay, so this brings us to the absolute core of the debate. Is this global arms shopping spree a countdown to war, or is it a frantic, expensive attempt to prevent a war from ever starting? This is the central question we have to unpack. On this slide, you can see the 2 sides of the coin. The argument for conflict is pretty simple. Look at history. The years leading up to World War I and World War II were marked by intense arms races. It creates a spiral of mistrust and raises the risk of a catastrophic miscalculation. But on the other hand, you have the deterrence argument. This side says, hold on, the context today is different. Most of these weapons are being bought for defense. And you can't ignore the elephant in the room, nuclear weapons. There's still a massive check against all-out war between the big powers. And the key word, as the editorial argues, is intent. European nations aren't planning to invade Russia. They're trying to make themselves so strong that Russia wouldn't even think about pushing further. It's the same logic in the Indo-Pacific. The goal isn't to start a war with China. It's to make the potential cost of any aggressive action way too high to be worth it.
So, if this isn't just a repeat of a history lesson, what are the real dangers today? Because the situation is definitely more complicated now. We have new technologies in a totally different geopolitical landscape. We have to look past the old comparisons to really get a handle on the unique risks we're facing in the 21st century.
The true danger today is this kind of toxic mix of new risks. First, you have game-changing technology. Cheap but deadly drones are everywhere. And then you have hypersonic missiles, which are incredibly fast and can change direction, that make old defense systems almost useless. Second, diplomacy just isn't working. We've seen it fail to solve the crises in Ukraine and Gaza. Third, global bodies like the UN feel weaker than ever, leaving a huge diplomatic vacuum. And maybe the biggest threat of all? It's not one country arming up. It's that everyone is doing it, all at the same time, in a world where nobody seems to trust each other.
So, to wrap this part up, a global war isn't a sure thing, but the risk has definitely gone up. That Elon Musk quote from the beginning, we should treat it as a serious warning, not a prophecy. In the end, it's not the weapons that will decide our future, but the wisdom or lack thereof of our leaders. All right, now for all you aspirants out there, let's pivot and really lock down the key takeaways you'll need for your mains exam. These are the points that will help you build a really sharp analytical answer. When you're structuring your answer, these are the concepts you need to hit. You have to be able to argue both sides of that central debate. Is it conflict or deterrence? Always analyze the intent behind a nation's actions. That's a cornerstone of IR. Don't forget the role of nuclear weapons, and definitely talk about how new tech is changing warfare and how the decline of global institutions is making everything more dangerous. And here are the numbers you absolutely need to remember. Being able to quote these specific figures from the SIPRI report, well, that's what will add that extra weight and credibility to your arguments. It shows you've done your homework. And finally, to put it all into practice, here's a question for your mains preparation. The recent surge in global arms sales is not a countdown to a new world war, but rather a symptom of a deep geopolitical churn and a shift in the global power balance. Take a moment to critically analyze this. Use all the points we've discussed today to build a balanced, thoughtful, and comprehensive answer. See you again tomorrow with an important editorial. For this, subscribe to the YouTube channel Unlock UPSC. Thank you.